Hello there, good driving buddies, and welcome to your guide-along tour for Rocky Mountain National Park. It looks like we're starting to drive towards the Fall River entrance to the park. If that's our plan, then you're doing absolutely great. All we have to do is keep following this same road. Off to our right, you should see a grand old white building. That's the Stanley Hotel, and it's been tied to the history of the park since the very beginning. You'll hear lots more about the man who built it as we travel around the park. But for now, let's keep making our way towards the entrance. To the entrance, let's make sure we have everything we need for today. If your plan is to go on a hike of an hour, it's only going to be a few minutes, and we'll be at the Fall River entrance station. You'll also see the Fall River Visitor Center on our left. There's a good sign, and that's a pretty good place to stop in if we have a lot of questions or to see if anything special is going on during our visit. As soon as we enter the park, we're almost immediately going to have some decisions to make about where we're going to go first. Let me give you a really quick overview about how the park is laid out. The first option we're going to have is to drive what's called the Old Fall River Road, all the way up to the Alpine Visitor Center. That is, as long as the road is open. This is a must-do activity during our visit. The road is only 9 miles long and was the original road to the High Alpine. It's unpaved, but it is kept in good condition, so any normal car can do this drive. There are restrictions on trailers and large vehicles, though. The other very popular place towards this side of the park is Bear Lake. There are loads of great hikes there, and the setting is stunning. I'll have some directions if we want to go that way. But a word of warning, that is usually very busy throughout the summer. If we can time our visit to Bear Lake for early morning or late afternoon or even evening, it can be less crowded. The most amazing drive in the park is to go up Trail Ridge Road. That's the drive that follows for 11 miles above the tree line in the Alpine Tundra. I'll explain more as we get closer, but that is an incredibly beautiful drive. From the Alpine Visitor Center, we have the choice to either turn around and come back towards Estes Park, or we can keep going to the western side of the park where Grand Lake sits. I'm guessing that we've already made some plans for our day, so I'll make sure you know when we need to turn off for different things.
Oops. I thought it was open. Sorry about that. Fuck you going, dude? Oh, you want me to pull over? That's what it is.
Now that we've entered the park, we're almost immediately in an area that wildlife love. We should always be watching for elk and moose, though we'll have a much better chance of moose spotting if we travel over to the Grand Lake side of the park. As we pass through a couple of bends, we'll start to see an open meadow on our left that is called Horseshoe Park, and it's identifying the ground. The rams, which are the males, have big curved horns. During the summer months, they are very friendly with each other, but in the fall, when it's time to win the attention of the ladies or the ewes, they use those horns and double-layered skulls as battering rams to fight for dominance. Sheep can be on or beside the road at any time, so please take care if they are present. And also, please only pull over and stop in places where it's allowed. We can't just block the traffic. Rangers will sometimes take over traffic control here to make sure the sheep aren't endangered or stressed. We'll see the small sheep lakes ahead on our left. It's a pretty good place to scan around for animals. Soon after the lakes and pullout, if it's after the traditional 4th of July long weekend opening, we'll have the option to turn right and join the old Fall River Road. Remember, that's the historic unpaved road that takes us up to the Alpine Visitor Center. The drive is a little adventure, but nothing that is especially difficult. I say it's something that everyone should do when visiting Rocky Mountain National Park. We can do it now or save it for later. After 2 miles, the road becomes one-way only, and we can only drive the main part of it uphill. We can also see the alluvial fan in the very first part of the road. The alternative for getting to the Alpine Visitor Center is to drive Trail Ridge Road, which is paved. If we want to do that, then just keep going straight. Don't turn towards Endo Valley and the Fall River Road. Here for the old Fall River Road and the alluvial fan. For everything else, just stay straight. That's great. We've turned onto the Endo Valley Road. We can go this way for about 2 miles and we'll still be able to turn around and come back if we want to. The first parking lot is for the popular Lawn Lake hiking trail. After that, we see the alluvial fan, a huge debris field created by a massive amount of water coming down the hillside. There's a trail that goes up into the debris field, and this is also a popular place to walk around and explore the rocks.
Holy shit.
Some farmers built a dam at the base of Lawn Lake to create a reliable water supply for farming in the Loveland area. The road leading up to the dam got worse over time, and inspections on the dam stopped. One July morning in 1982, the dam broke, sending 29 million gallons of water down the hill. The amount of water coming down the mountainside sounded like a jet crashing. One lucky or unlucky trash collector heard the noise and looked up to see boulders the size of cars tumbling down the hillside. He blocked the road with his truck so no one would inadvertently go up the road into the danger zone, and he ran to the emergency phone to call rangers. His fast actions helped to warn the people in the town of Estes Park, who had no idea what was going on. Anticipating this water surging into town, locals moved fast to help sandbag buildings and get to safety. is the entrance to the Endo Valley picnic area. This is the last place we can turn around if we want to go back. After that, we'll be on the old Fall River Road and committed to keep driving the one-way route up to the Alpine Visitor Center. Old Fall River Road is not paved, but it is well maintained and we should have no trouble driving it in any regular car. Larger vehicles and trailers must obey any restrictions that apply.
Come on, turkeys.
It looks like we're coming back from the alluvial fan. Well, I sure hope you felt a connection to the power that they crush the rock that sits under them, turning it into gravel and rubble. Some of that debris is pushed out to the sides, like snow does when you push it with a shovel. So here it's created a long lower hill on the side of the valley. Over a long time, soils and dust blows in and fills in the spaces, so it just looks like a normal hill. Let's turn into the higher viewpoint. The sign here points out which peaks that we can see. It looks like we're going to drive up Trail Ridge Road. You may have heard me talk how the old Fall River Road was the original road built up to the Alpine Tundra, and to this day, it's quite a fun adventure to drive it. But the same reasons that make it fun also make it inadequate to handle increasing amounts of automobile traffic that were visiting the park almost from the day it was opened. The challenges included that it was very steep, as much as 16% slope in places, and that it was barely wide enough for two cars to pass each other. And that can be a challenge on a steep road. So even though the old Fall River Road was open for business in 1920, within a few years, plans were being made for an alternative route, the one that we're driving on now. Building of the new route, which followed a different, well-used Indian trail, began in 1929. And after 3 years, the route was completed to the Fall River Pass. And this time, the road never was any steeper than a more friendly 7% grade. In just a minute, after we round the corners up ahead, a long view of the mountains ahead will open up. Those mountains are part of the Mummy Range, and we'll see 3 different mountain peaks. Starting from the left, the peaks are named Chapin, Chiquita, and the one to the right often has snow on it. It's in the shape of a Y, so it's called Ypsilon, named for the Greek letter Y. You can see their glacially carved faces and gullies. I'll point them out again later when we can see them from the west side, where our view of them is drastically different. If we drive all the way to Grand Lake, and that's something that I do recommend that we do, the western portion of the road, which descends the Comanche Valley, wasn't completed for another 6 years. But then both sides of the park were connected, and visitors could enjoy a loop driving tour from Denver through Rocky Mountain National Park, and then back to Denver without having to backtrack on the same route. Coming up on our right is a small pullout that will fit about 10 cars. From here, there's a short boardwalk that visits an area of ponds that were created by beavers, damming the stream. Beavers are actually quite rare in the park now, so we're unlikely to see one, but we will see the result of their work. These industrious little guys' ability to change the landscape is second only to humans. Now, this is not a must-do stop, but if we have lots of time, we might like to spend, say, 15 minutes here or so. Keep in mind that it was fur trappers hunting beaver that were most likely the very first white people to see these parts of the country. On this next sharp left bend coming up, we'll see the turnoff to the Hidden Valley picnic area. It's quite an attractive area, but we have much more expansive views ahead of us, so it's okay if you want to keep going. If you are curious, turn in and I'll tell you why this area is actually even more popular in winter than in summer. The picnic area is just ahead, and there's also a generously sized parking lot here. That's because this is where many families come to play in the snow in the winter. It used to be an actual mini ski resort until the national park decided that a ski area did not fit the mandate of the national park, and the lifts and infrastructure were removed in 1991. But because the slope is fairly gentle, it's a great place to enjoy sliding downhill on a sled. It can be a pretty busy place, and there's a warming hut on weekends and holidays, so you can have a hot chocolate and get ready to get back out on the snow again. Even though the lifts are gone, some locals still enjoy skiing the old-fashioned way, by walking uphill in their skis, using their own power and energy. Then you get to cruise down, and there's a good chance you might even find some fresh tracks. I wanted to give a special mention about what to do if we see cyclists on this road. Many riders enjoy the special challenge of cycling this road. There's a satisfying gain in elevation to overcome, and since much of the route is 11,000 feet of elevation and higher, it's an extra effort to also deal with the lesser availability of oxygen. So if we come up behind a cyclist, please be patient. I can assure you that they are working their little heinies off. Wait until you see a long open space and then gently pull wide and go past them. It's better if you don't slam down on the accelerator and give them a big cloud of exhaust fumes too. And speaking of elevation, it's probably time I encouraged us to keep drinking water. You feel a little bit of a headache coming on? Those can be common occurrence at high altitude, and keeping hydrated can help with that. When we live at high altitude, our bodies compensate by producing more red blood cells. The more red cells we have, the more oxygen we're able to deliver around the body. More blood cells can mean thicker blood. So that's another reason to keep ourselves well hydrated. We've all heard of athletes training at high altitude. The physiology behind that is that while training in a high altitude, low oxygen environment, the athlete produces more red blood cells to carry oxygen. If you then go to sea level after training at high altitude, Your body still has those extra red blood cells flowing through your arteries, so it's like getting a boost of oxygen delivery to improve your performance. We are coming up to a terrific viewpoint that we really should stop and enjoy. You'll see a parking area on our left. Just go ahead and ignore that. We do not want to try to turn in across traffic. As we go around the bend, there's another large car park on our side of the road. This is called Many Parks Overlook, and it's a must stop for us. For here, we enjoy views to many parks or meadows. We can see Moraine Park, Upper Beaver Meadows, and Horseshoe Park, all formed by glacial activity. The forested parts between the meadows are called moraines. A moraine is a large pile of rocks and gravel that have been pushed around and piled up by the movement of the glaciers. Hopefully the weather is kind to us and we'll get to enjoy views to Long Peak, which is the largest in the national park, standing at an elevation of 14,259 feet. There's some signage here and it will help us identify the different peaks and areas. From this vantage point, looking west, we may see fire scars on some of the higher peaks. This is from the massive and, I gotta say, rather scary East Troublesome Fire that burned in October of 2020. It started west of the Continental Divide and jumped the divide to burn on the east side. If we drive all the way across the park to Grand Lake, which is definitely something I recommend, we'll see some of that devastation up close. For many visitors, what's right at the very top of their list of things they want to see while here in the park is the larger animals, like elk, moose, and bighorn sheep. Your chances of seeing moose are much higher if we keep following this drive past the Alpine Visitor Center and down into the Kalanichi Valley and towards the Grand Lake entrance to the park on the western side. If we have the time, it's worth doing. The driving time from the Visitor Center to the Grand Lake entrance is only roughly an hour each way. So, with some sightseeing stops along the way, we could drive from the top down to the west boundary of the park and back to the summit again in about 3 to 4 hours comfortably. The animal that is much more common to see on this side is the elk. Now, elk don't like to get too hot. So, during the summer months, they tend to climb out of the valley and up into the tundra, where it can easily be 30 degrees cooler. It's almost hard to believe, but into the late 1800s and early 20th century, there were no elk left around Estes Park. Overzealous hunting had all but wiped them out. A plan was carried out to reintroduce the elk, sponsored by Estes Park's wealthiest resident, F.O. Stanley. The plan was a success. However, we humans have a tendency to disturb the balance of natural things. We also managed to wipe out the natural predator of the elk, the wolf. The elk we introduced quickly multiplied, and since there were no wolves around to help control the elk numbers, well, at times the elk start to become excessive. So the NPS has to manage numbers, usually by relocating large chunks of the herd to other locations. When the herd is large and they come up to the delicate tundra, they can cause significant damage to the sensitive vegetation that is able to survive in this difficult condition. We should also be scanning the meadows for elk. If we do see some, most likely others would have also seen them too, and an elk jam may form on the road. Please do not contribute to that. Make sure we pull our car out of the driving lanes if we want to stop and watch the elk. next big viewpoint coming up is about 1.5 miles ahead, and it is a really good one. So I'm recommending we should stop. There's a large parking lot there and also a restroom building, so some of us might be glad for that. This viewpoint is called Rainbow Curve Overlook. These mountains were formed by a few different forces of nature. Tectonic plate collisions has pushed this land this far up towards the sky. At this point, we're at 2 miles above sea level. These are some tremendous forces that are difficult for we mere mortals to comprehend. I'm not including geologists in that mere mortal group. They love views like this. There's also some volcanic activity that's gone on here too. But much of the shaping and contouring of the valleys and peaks has been done by glaciers. Massive and incredibly heavy, sometimes as much as 2,000 feet thick. The glaciers were pushed along by gravity, scraping the faces off mountains, crushing the rocks underneath them, digging the valleys deeper. And in some places, the sheer weight of the glaciers bends the rock it's sitting on, creating depressions that turn into beautiful mountain lakes. So while we're at Rainbow Curve, imagine this area filled with ice, with just the highest mountain peaks poking through. As we face out from the viewpoint, we'll also see the alluvial fan, which looks like a giant rock slide. That was caused by 2 flooding episodes, one caused by man, the other natural. We'll see back to the road we've just driven along too. The Park Service always puts good signs at these viewpoints, so you can see which mountains are which. Also, we might see some wildlife here. This time, the small variety. Little Chippendale chipmunks. Yes, they are wildlife. Chipmunks are masters of deception and will try and convince us that they are starving. They'll beg for food. No matter how cute those little guys are, do not feed them our human food. It's bad for their little bodies. They get plenty of food on their own, so please don't let their acting fool you. We don't want to hurt them. We should be close if we haven't already arrived. Just a little word of warning that we will drive on a section of road that feels quite narrow. Don't worry, it doesn't last too long. Try to enjoy the panoramic views on both sides of this dramatic valley. In different places around the park, I talk about how there was a local push by prominent citizens around Estes Park to have a road built this way. But the National Park Service was a federal agency operated out of Washington, D.C., which was created in 1916. not too much budget or resources. There's a famous story about the very first director, Stephen Mather. He was wealthy and he loved touring around the West. He didn't like what he was seeing in the national parks. They weren't being protected, so he wrote to a college alumni who happened to be the Secretary of the Interior, complaining about the poor state of the parks. Well, he quickly received a letter back saying, "Dear Stephen, if you don't like how the parks are being run, why don't you come down to Washington and run them yourself?" So he did. Stephen Mather and later Horace Albright both recognized that the automobile was going to be the way that many people experienced the parks. They didn't like the way highway departments wanted to build roads in beautiful mountain places. They fought hard to make sure that roads did not leave ugly scars on places they were trying to conserve. They sometimes built much more expensive roads to maintain the aesthetic. They also established some criteria that are consistent throughout the national parks. One of those are the retaining walls. The walls are hand-built by stonemasons using rock disrupted by the road building that tend to blend better with the environment. As we get higher, we can see that the trees are finding the conditions much harsher. We'll see trees that have limbs that only point in one direction due to the ravaging wind. These are limber pine, named for how they'll twist while they're growing. The last tree to grow before we reach the tundra are the dark bushes known as Krummholz, which is German for twisted wood. At the elevation around 11,400 feet, trees can no longer stand the altitude, frigid temperatures, and lack of moisture. This is called the tree line. If there are cars parked on our left, they'll belong to people hiking on the Ute Trail, which follows a route used by the native Ute people. We can keep going to the next major viewpoint, which is coming up at Forest Canyon Overlook. We should turn into the parking lot there. There's a short walk to a viewing platform with signs explaining how the glaciers formed this deep valley. We'll also see the peaks across the valley that are all above 12,000 feet in elevation. Forest Canyon, a deep glacier-carved U-shaped valley, parallels Trail Ridge Road all the way to the Gore Range Overlook. This glacier was more than 1,500 feet thick, and debris can be found below in Moraine Park. Glacier debris, however, can travel thousands of miles east on glaciers. The Midwest states are full of rich mineral debris from these glaciers, which contribute to why those states have such good farming. We'll also see where several side tributaries of the glacier sat. As the ice pulled away from the rocks, and because of its immense weight, it leaves behind steep walls in the form of an amphitheater. We call this a cirque, and when a beautiful lake remains, it's called a tarn. As we drive the next few miles, we'll see these different cirques and tarns. We are well and truly in the tundra now. This road winds for 11 miles up here above the tree line. This is a special experience because normally the only way to get to places like this is to put in a very strenuous hike, walking yourself up through the elevation to get here. Depending on the time of year that we're here, there still might be quite a lot of snow patches around. It might feel very soggy and damp. We might have a colorful show of alpine wildflowers. or it might just feel barren and exposed. Life and living on the tundra is for those hardy animals and plants that have adapted to handle the harsh conditions. The growing season for plants at this elevation averages only 40 days. Winds in the winter can howl up to 150 miles per hour. The temperatures at this elevation can be 30 degrees or more lower than in Estes Park. However, animals like the cute little pika, which look like a giant mouse but is actually part of the rabbit family, live on the tundra all year long. They work all summer to stockpile their stash of gathered greens to their dens so that they'll have food all winter long. It's a long winter for them because they stay active. The yellow-bellied marmot also lives on the tundra year-round, but they hibernate through the winter. The elk and bighorn sheep will migrate to the tundra in the summer to escape the higher temperatures of the valley below. If they tried to spend an average winter up here, they'd either freeze or starve to death. The plants that are able to survive up here tend to have quite delicate root systems that can be damaged by our footsteps. When you do even a short hike up here, please stay on the trails so we don't have a negative impact on the environment. Coming up to a great part of the drive. It's called the Rock Cut, for what will be obvious reasons, and through here we're at 12,110 feet. A path for the road had to be blasted through this ridge. Just past the Rock Cut is a parking area with outstanding views, and from there we can also walk on the Tundra Communities Trail, if the weather is nice, of course. The trail takes us to those odd-shaped rocks we can partially see from here, called mushroom rocks. They have a dark brown metamorphic granite layer on top, called schist. The stalks are made of sandy silt-formed rock. The bottom is softer and has eroded faster than the brown schist caps, so they look like mushrooms. If we do the walk, take it slow, as you'll likely find yourself short of breath. Watch and listen for those pikas and marmots in this area. You may have already worked it out for yourself, but I should mention the poles on the sides of the road. Quite a lot of snow can drift and accumulate here through the winter. When the weather turns to spring, the road gets plowed to help have it open earlier in the season. I'm sure you can understand that the plow drivers really appreciate being able to see where the road actually is. We've seen a few places where it wouldn't be too good to miss the road and go off the side. I hope you're enjoying our drive through the tundra, and I have my fingers crossed that the clouds and weather have been kind, and that we're enjoying long-range views, and that you'll get a sense of the sometimes desolate feel of the tundra. You'll barely notice, but we'll drive through what's called Iceberg Pass. On a clear day, the views from the small roadside pullouts can be outstanding. When this road was first proposed, there were some objections, and some, if not many of the local people, were resistant. They didn't feel it was right that people should so easily be able to get to places like this in the relative comfort of an automobile. It's almost like we must earn it by hiking or riding a horse. but they did like the idea of the prosperity that these visitors would bring to the town and area as their numbers kept rising. Inside the National Park management, there was similar debate about automobiles and easier access. The NPS always has to determine the balance between accessibility to fantastic places, public safety, and preservation of these unique landscapes. If the population doesn't get to see and enjoy areas that are protected, they find it more difficult to get behind the concept of conserving them. As we round this next tight corner, we'll arrive at the Lava Cliffs overlook. Let's pull in. There's a few things to take in from this viewpoint. Do you remember when I pointed out the three mountains at the start of this drive? The mountains were Chapin, Chiquita, and Epsilon. We've now driven around to the other side of them, and the view that we see of them is quite different. They look smooth and gentle. Imagine if you were exploring from this side, you go to the top of one of these peaks quite easily. You think you're going to just easily go down the other side. But hold on, Mary, that's a pretty steep cliff I'm walking into. The lava cliffs themselves that we see from this viewpoint provide an amazing contrast to the surrounding landscape. As their name suggests, this rock was the result of volcanic flow. The cliffs are technically metamorphic volcanic ash forms, but I don't think any of us wants to get too deep into a discussion about what that means. But the result of it was that passing glaciers exposed this rock, but could not grind it down quite as much. This is the only place in the park where we see this difference. The next range going further west and still inside the park is the Never Summer Mountains, and they saw more volcanic activity than what we've driven by so far. Going to rise a little bit more, but soon we'll reach our highest point on the drive of 12,183 feet. You would think this monumental point in the road would at least get a sign, but there's nothing marking this point, other than me just telling you. From that point on, it's all downhill. Here does seem a little narrow, and it's kind of like hanging on the edge. But don't worry, it's well constructed. Our next overlook is called the Gore Range Overlook. There's a parking lot on our left, and I suggest we pull in so we can soak up all that we can see. First off, we'll see the last of Forest Canyon, the long canyon that we've been paralleling on our drive across the tundra. Then on a clear day, we can see all the way to the Gore Range. On the other side of this range is Vail Resort, more than 60 miles away. We'll also see the Never Summer Range. Basically, this one overlook shows off many of Colorado's mountain ranges. It's a pretty nice stop to take in the view. Alpine Visitor Center coming up just ahead. Let's turn in. The Visitor Center is not like any other. At close to 12,000 feet above sea level, it's the highest visitor center in the entire national park system. You'll notice the logs on the roof. They're there to provide extra strength so that snow piled on the roof in the winter won't collapse it. The windows have to be covered so they don't get smashed by snowdrifts. This is a stop that basically everyone driving this road is going to make. So be patient if finding a parking space takes a little bit of time. The Trail Ridge store next to the visitor center has souvenirs and some food from a cafe. Once we find a parking space and catch our breath, there's a paved trail and staircase that heads out onto the tundra. We should go up and have a look around if the weather allows it. It's called Huffer Hill. You'll quickly understand why. After we've completed our visit here, we should decide if you want to start heading back towards Estes Park, or if we want to continue this way towards the Comanche Valley and Grand Lake. Enjoy yourselves. Another viewpoint just ahead. This one is Medicine Bow Curve, and it's named because it provides a view of the Medicine Bow Mountains, which extend all the way to Wyoming. It's the last view that we'll have in this direction, as once we round the hairpin turn, we'll start making our way west and then south for the rest of the journey. When the original Old Fall River Road was built, travelers used to go over the pass where the visitor center is, though there was no visitor center back then, and were able to continue to the small Poudre Lake, which we'll also see. That part of the road was torn up when this Trail Ridge Road was completed, but you can still hike the original route on the Ute Trail. We should be enjoying a nice long view down this valley. The river that flows in that valley is called the Cache-la Poudre River, and it was named by French fur trappers who were some of the first non-native people to see these lands. The name means hide the powder when translated to English. The dates are uncertain, but either in the 1820s or maybe the 30s, when these men were passing through here, they got caught in a severe snowstorm, which stopped their progress for a few days. They decided that their wagons were going to be a problem if there was going to be more snow, so they decided they needed to lighten their load. They dug pits beside the river and buried some supplies to hide them. A big part of the weight they offloaded was gunpowder, so that's where the name originates. Though we can't tell from here, you'll have to believe me when I tell you that the river flows in the opposite direction that we're traveling now. The river makes its way to Fort Collins and then eventually joins the Mississippi River system. The reason that I'm telling you this is because we're approaching the Continental Divide. The idea of the first road up here to the Alpine Tundra was that it gave opportunity to visitors to get to the divide, which is geologically significant. I'll explain more ahead. As you can see, we have now dropped below the tree line, and we're leaving the tundra. I sure hope we had a good view today so you can appreciate what a unique environment it is, and especially that we can drive our cars through here. Just a couple of minutes ahead, we'll be alongside the small Poudre Lake. On the far side of the lake, on our left side, there's a parking area. That's where we'll be on the Continental Divide. The divide is a line that is somewhere between a theoretical and actual line that divides how water runs to either the Pacific or Atlantic Oceans, and it runs from the north of the continent all the way down through Mexico and beyond. If water is on the west side of the line, it will eventually find its way to the Pacific. If it's on the east side, it will find its way to the Atlantic. Now, I'm simplifying this a lot, but you get the idea. When expeditions were sent out west, part of the task surveyors were given was to identify the path of this line. In some places, it's used as the line that decides a border between states or provinces. The divide is less significant to us nowadays as we have air travel, satellites, and many other tools to understand geography. But a century and more ago, identifying this line was significant, and the designers of these roads we've been enjoying made the opportunity to visit the Continental Divide a highlight of the journey. It was a part of the lure to come visit and make the trip. When we get to the parking lot at Milner Pass, there's a sign, and we can stand and straddle the Continental Divide. This is Poudre Lake on our left, and we can turn into the parking area just ahead on our left too. We can pull in and take a picture at the sign that crosses the Continental Divide. Now, if you're feeling especially energetic, we can hike a section of the Ute Trail from here back up to the Alpine Visitor Center. If we did that, you would also be following the route of the road that those adventurous early automobile driving tourists would use. Also, be on the lookout for bighorn sheep and elk, which seem to like this area. We see on the right just ahead is for Lake Irene. It's quite a pleasant picnic spot and has a 1-mile trail around the small basin lake. It's nice, but not a place we have to stop. Just to finish up about the Continental Divide, the water in Poudre Lake flows into the Cache la Poudre River. And remember how I said that flows the opposite way to the way we were driving above the valley? The river flows to Fort Collins and then joins the Mississippi. The Mississippi River empties into the Gulf of Mexico, which is connected to the Atlantic Ocean. Even though we've only traveled a short distance, the water from Lake Irene will find its way to the Colorado River, and that eventually drains into the Pacific Ocean. quick update about what's coming up ahead. Our driving time to exit the park and reach the town of Grand Lake is about 45 minutes. But I do have a couple more suggested stops before we get there, so we might even take a little bit longer than that. We have some very interesting switchbacks coming up, but I'll give us good warning as we get closer to those too. Once we have descended down into the valley, it'll be easy driving the rest of the way. Coming up to the viewpoint at Farview Curve. You'll see pull-out area on our left, so take care if we turn in. From here, we get a preview of the valley that we're driving into, and we'll have an amazing view of the Never Summer Mountain Range, the only volcanic range in the park. See if you can make out a horizontal scar on the range. It's called the Grand Ditch, and we'll talk about that later. We can also see the extent of the Comanche Valley. Geologists believe the glacier that helped shape this valley was the largest in the park and extended almost 20 miles to the south. And if it's a clear day, we should see the mountains that are well to the south in the Fraser Valley. It's definitely worth making a stop here. It's not long now until we reach the first of 5 complete switchback turns that'll help us descend into the valley. Just slow down on the approach to these corners and we'll be fine. If it starts to smell like our brakes are burning, might be a good idea to use your gears to slow down. Rocky Mountain National Park, like many pine forest areas in the West, has suffered from infestation by mountain pine beetles. We see quite a lot of dead lodgepole pines throughout this part of the drive. The beetles lay its eggs and larvae hatch under the bark, and that leads to all kinds of bad things, like loss of nutrients and dehydration of the tree. 2 things kill the beetle: fire and prolonged periods of extreme cold during winter. Unfortunately, that's something that has not been happening in cycles in recent years. Studies indicate that the beetles are able to fly about 2/3 of a mile in search of new trees to infect. Some parks do prescribe burns to try to stop the beetles from migrating by making uninfected trees just too far away, like using burn barriers to control wildfires. But forest fires, even controlled ones, can be risky. Park officials here are hopeful that the worst part of the pine beetle problem in Rocky Mountain National Park is great, driver. Only 2 more switchbacks and we'll be done. We'll then be driving in the Kawanichi Valley, and the rather innocuous-looking stream that we'll be following alongside is actually the early parts of the Colorado River. Yes, the Colorado River, the one that carved the Grand Canyon, but looks so meek here. There's no grand spot that is the official beginning. It simply starts from snowmelt from the Never Summer Mountains. Water in Colorado is a big deal, and it can be controversial. There are nearly 20 rivers whose headwaters are in Colorado, 20 rivers that originate in this state. And there's not one single river that flows through Colorado from another state. So the source of all water for the state and others downriver is either from rain or snow. There's a saying in Colorado that whiskey is for drinking, the water is for fighting. This is often true, as most of the water in Colorado is regulated by water rates. You may have noticed a horizontal scar on the hillside of the Never Summers when we saw them from Farview Curve. That is called the Grand Ditch. The Grand Ditch was one of the first water diversions in the state. It was dug by hand back in the late 1800s before the national park was established. It was created to divert snowmelt from the Never Summers into the Poudre, which then flows on to the eastern plains. Early settlers knew of the importance of somehow keeping as much water from the mountains and rivers in the state for farming as possible. Tunnels were dug to get water from one side of the mountains to the other. Starting as early as 1879, water in Colorado was being allocated through a series of complicated laws and rights. Lots of diversions were being created, and if someone is diverting water upstream from you, that can be a problem. If someone downstream from you has a senior right over you and is exercising their right, you have to stop diverting and let your water flow on by. The #1 water right on the Colorado River is a power plant in Glenwood Canyon. If they call for the water, all diversions must stop, allowing all of the water to flow on down. It's complicated, I know. The Colorado River, which starts right here above the Kawanichi Valley, flows 1,450 miles through mountains, canyons, and 3 major deserts. It feeds the Imperial Valley in California, which sustains a multi-billion-dollar agriculture industry. More water is distributed from the Colorado River Basin than any other river basin in the world. So with that, bottoms up. Let's take a drink of water. From here all the way to the park exit and even into town is a great place to be on the lookout for moose. Now, no guarantees, and there might even be other wildlife, but best chances for a moose sighting are through here. If we're lucky to see moose, please do not ever approach them too closely. A good distance to keep away is 2 to 3 bus lengths. Moose are known for having a mean nature. You don't want to be on the wrong end of a grumpy moose. It's common for there to be moose jams when one is spotted, especially the bull moose with a full-grown rack on his head. The same rules apply for seeing moose. If you decide to stop, make sure we pull right off the road so we don't impede traffic coming through. If we don't stop, please just proceed slowly so as we don't stress the animal and so we don't have any mishaps with tourists who temporarily lose their common sense while in awe of a wildlife sighting and decide to walk on the road. It It's always best to stay in your vehicle to watch and to take pictures. You might get out of your car and think, well, you're far enough away, but those big guys can move quickly and are suddenly too close for comfort. The moose like this area because there's lots of marshy and swampy areas that are rich in the water plants and willows that they love to eat. Approaching my last recommended stop inside the park boundary, and it's an important part of history for this part of the park. Many of the people who were first drawn to Colorado were drawn here by the idea of striking it rich by finding gold or silver or other mining successes. Some more pragmatic early settlers imagined themselves homesteading and ranching cattle. A German man, John Holzworth, thought this valley would be good for ranching cattle. He came to this area from Denver after his saloon was closed due to prohibition and decided to start a ranch. Their family ranch was just outside the park's boundary and ranched cattle for about 3 years. But John was a smart man and had watched the progress of Fall River Road being built. He realized that if people came over from the Estes Park side, well, they'd need a place to stay for the night. He might even get them to stay for a few nights, and tourists could become his gold. He turned his ranch into a tourist dude ranch with home-cooked meals, horseback rides, and sightseeing tours. They ran the dude ranch until 1974, when the Nature Conservancy bought the property and incorporated it into the park. There's a half-mile trail that we can take to some of the old buildings that are still standing. The buildings have the rooms still set to how life was back in those days. We should see the sign soon on our right. It's an interesting and easy place to visit. The half-mile trail to the site from the parking lot is relatively flat. Let's turn in if we're interested to spend, say, a half an hour here. The other things we see in the valley, and it continues up the road, are the dead lodgepole pine trees. When the trees have no needles or are entirely brown or orange, they are indeed dead. This comes from a pine beetle infestation infestation that hit the area hard during the early 2000s. This nasty little bug burrows through the bark and lays their eggs. The eggs hatch into larvae, and it's these larvae that deplete nutrients from the tree, and a fungus they also carry dehydrates the tree. That's a bad formula. It causes many infected trees to die. The natural enemy of the pine beetle is long and bitterly cold winters. But many recent winters have had warmer temperatures and lower amounts of precipitation. This combination weakens the trees and strengthens the beetle numbers. With the general warming of the climate, the bark doesn't have enough of the sustained extreme cold conditions to kill off the beetles. So year after year, they keep moving on to new uninfested sections, and with this much forest, not much can be done to stop them. However, in this area, scientists feel the beetles have done all the damage they can and have moved on. For public safety, the park has removed hazardous trees along the road and in the campgrounds that could fall in high winds. Young, healthy trees are growing again, and at some point, the forest should have a generation of new lodgepoles and other trees. Aspens, which require plenty of sunlight, can also take advantage of the lodgepole's misfortune and compete for areas where the lodgepoles once dominated. Let's go back to our ungulates. That's ungulates. This time elk, or water. Female elk, called cows, with their yearlings and calves, all live together in a herd for most of the year. Occasionally, a young male elk may be seen with a group of ladies, but generally the males live in bachelor groups. During the fall mating season, called the rut, the bull elk will fight each other for dominance. The prize? Collect a group of cows called a harem to mate with. Now during the rut, the elk sing a mighty cry called a bugle. They bugle to attract cows and to advertise their dominance to other bulls. Listening to elk bugling in the fall is absolutely amazing. Another performance the elk do is to pee in a muddy hole they dig with their antlers and then roll around in it. Ladies, Oh, you'd find that hard to resist, wouldn't you? They also rub their antlers on bushes and trees, and more about that in a minute. Once a bull has his harem, he will guard them aggressively. Elk can be hurt or even killed in antler battles with competing males. After the mating season is over, the harems break up and the cows will regroup with each other and the yearling elk. The bulls get back into their bachelor groups. Like professional athletes, last season means nothing. You've got to start all over again for the next rut. Just about to start a very interesting, and for some drivers, a fun part of Trail Ridge Road. We're about to round the first in a series of switchbacks. Like any good road up a mountain, switchbacks, of course, are part of the event. If driving in the mountains is a relatively new experience for you, a switchback is when the road turns about 180 degrees and goes in the opposite direction. It's all about increasing the distance to create a grade or steepness that's manageable to drive. There are 5 switchbacks coming up. Let's take our time, as this is a really beautiful section of the road. As we proceed, there are 2 things to watch out for. We need to keep our eyes out for animals, as they could be on the road at any time, and switchbacks sometimes create blind corners. The second thing to watch out for is cyclists. If we see some, most likely they are experienced riders to take on such an epic feat. Trail Ridge is higher in elevation than all of the big passes the pros ride in the Tour de France. So if we come upon a cyclist, we need to just wait until we can slowly and safely pass them. Please give them plenty of room, and it's best if we don't accelerate hard as we go by. They're working hard. They know that we're behind them. I find the ones going downhill are often smiling a lot more. But while they're going uphill, well, I don't see much smiling at that time. Oh yeah, are we having fun? Don't worry, there's not too many switchbacks today. We'll get some fantastic views back down the valley as we climb though. Remember, the elk like to get to higher elevation in the summer, so they walk up here. Not on the road, but to higher areas on the mountains. Let me finish about the elk as we get closer to the alpine tundra. The bull elk are known for their antlers. The antlers are grown each spring and shed by the following March or April when the new antlers are about to start growing again. While they're growing, they are in a state called velvet. The velvet is skin and blood vessels protecting the growing bone. Antlers can grow as much as an inch per day. While the antlers are in velvet, they're pliable and they can be damaged. You may see an elk walking around with a funny-looking antler, maybe pointing off in a different direction. Chances are the elk walked into a tree or something during the growth period and damaged the antler. Don't you worry about that elk. The next season, the antler will grow back normally, as long as the elk isn't so much of a klutz and walks into another tree. Once the mating season, or rut, begins, the elk shed the velvet by rubbing their antlers against trees or rocks. By doing this, he's also leaving behind his scent to other bull elk and for the ladies. By September, the antlers are solid bone and ready to display, and for the upcoming battles of the rut season. When the rut is over, and after carrying the antlers around all winter, they are then shed. They are heavy, and they have to be uncomfortable, and they actively try to knock them off their own heads. Oh, what a relief that would be. Since the shed antlers are rich in minerals, the little rodents love to eat them. That's why if we're lucky enough to find antlers in the park, we are not allowed to remove them. I hope you're enjoying our climb up Trail Ridge Road, which is the highest elevation continuous paved road in America. That was a mouthful. But the point is that this road climbs to a very high elevation. It's like no other road, because we'll be driving across the tundra with views so amazing, they're hard to describe. It's been designated an all-American road, meaning it's one of the most scenic and unique scenic byways in the country. And it's the highest road in any national park. The road was completed in 1932 and replaced Fall River Road as the main route through the park. We're going to climb above the tree line, a natural area where the trees stop growing because climate is too unfriendly. Then we'll travel about 11 miles at an elevation close to 12,000 feet across the tundra. As we go up in altitude, it'll seem like someone has removed the oxygen. Don't worry, it's still there, but there is less atmospheric pressure getting that oxygen to our lungs, making it a little bit harder to breathe. There's also less humidity, so the air is drier. These conditions will often make the sky a dark blue color, but it also dehydrates us quickly. So drinking water is no joke, and I mean water, not soda or coffee. The effects of high altitude can be hard on our bodies, so we need to pay attention and take care. We're coming up to Far View Curve. you'll see a pull-out area on our right, and we should turn in. It's a stunning view. The overlook will give us a view of the valley we just traveled through, and we'll also have amazing views of the Never Summer Mountain Range, the only volcanic range in the park. In 1914, members of the Arapaho tribe were brought to the region in a trip sponsored by the Colorado Mountain Club. The tribe members had spent their youth in the area and were asked to offer the Native American names for the various peaks, lakes, and geographic features in the area. They called the range Nichibichi, which translates to Never No Summer. The name was eventually settled on Never Summer Mountains. Many of the peaks in this range are named after cloud types, such as Mount Cirrus and Mount Cumulus. We can also see the extent of the Kawanichi Valley. The glacier that helped shape the valley was the largest in the park and extended almost 20. It's only about 15 minutes or so until we reach the Alpine Visitor Center, which is a must-do stop on our drive. And I'll tell you more as we get closer. Before we reach the Visitor Center, I'm going to suggest at least a quick stop or maybe even a short hike when we cross over the Continental Divide. What's that, I hear you ask? The Divide is just like it sounds. It's a line, well, a theoretical line, that runs all the way from Alaska down into Mexico. What it represents is the hydrological division of the North American continent. Sounds impressive, I know. In theory, water on the west side of the Continental Divide runs to the Pacific Ocean. Water on the east side will run to the Atlantic Ocean, though that could be via the Arctic Ocean or the Gulf of Mexico, depending on where you are. Imagine if you stood straddled across the line, facing south. If you spill a drop of coffee out of your right hand, if it wasn't absorbed into the ground first, it would find its way into a stream, and here it would go into the Colorado River, then that would flow out into the Pacific Ocean. But if you spilled that coffee on your left side, it would go the complete opposite way, even though you dropped it only a yard away from the first spill. That drop would travel via streams and rivers and would eventually flow out of the Mississippi River and the Gulf. It's easy to think of that kind of division occurring at the peak of a mountain. But that line also runs from mountain to mountain with the same theoretical effect. First turn off to the left is for Lake Irene. It's not a must stop, but if we're looking for a picnic spot, this is a nice choice, and it has a relatively easy 1-mile hike around the small basin lake. But about a half-mile after the turn, we'll reach the parking area for Milner Pass. Milner Pass is where Trail Ridge Road crosses the Continental Divide. We should make a quick stop at the sign there, and we can take a picture of ourselves spanning the Continental Divide. At this point, the line dips into this valley, making a kind of U-shape before going back along the top of Specimen Mountain, across Laputa Pass, and along to the ridge of the peaks in the Never Summer Range. The small lake at Milner Pass is the Poudre Lake. It's the start of the Cache La Poudre River. Cache La Poudre means hide the powder in French. It refers to an incident in the 1820s or maybe the 30s. The date is uncertain. But French fur trappers from Hudson's Bay Company were caught in a snowstorm for several days. They knew that their wagons were going to be a problem with the snow, so they decided to bury some of their supplies along the banks of the river to lighten the load. Much of what they decided to bury was gunpowder. So, the name makes sense. For geology fans, Milner Pass offers a view of pegmatite dikes. These are rock towers of very different kind of rock. In fact, it's hundreds of millions of years old. They stand out because they look very different from anything else that we've seen. If we have a need, I would also suggest using the bathrooms here, as our next stop is the Alpine Visitor Center, and the lines for the bathrooms there can be pretty long. During the summer months, this stretch of road past Milner Pass can be a favorite for wildflowers. They line the side of the road in their colorful palette of reds, yellows, and blues. All wildflowers in Colorado are protected, so please enjoy them. Take pictures of them, but please do not be tempted to pick them or try to take some with you. Beside the beautiful flowers, you may have noticed wooden poles sticking up alongside the road as we've driven up. These poles mark where the road is. Now, I'm sure it seems pretty obvious to us now, but in the spring, they're essential for the snowplow operators who are trying to clear the roads. Each year, simply getting this road open to traffic after the winter is an amazing feat. Progress reports of how the road crews are getting on often fills the local area news. Starting in mid-April, crews from both the east and west sides start their work of clearing the road with vehicles that are really just like giant snow blowers. The plow operators use the poles to know where the road is. They can encounter drifts as high as 22 feet. You can't move 20 feet of snow in one go, so they have to work in the same section of road over and over to plow down deeper and deeper until they reach the pavement. When the road first opens each spring, driving up Trail Ridge to see the walls of snow is a favorite thing for many to do, and they can be really impressive. Very weathered. These tough little trees are mostly Engelmann spruce and subalpine fir, and they have adapted to this elevation when other trees cannot. The tree line can vary depending on the direction the hillside faces, weather effects, avalanches, or sun and shade. Average temperature and moisture regulate the length and conditions of the growing season. In general, the tree line gets lower the farther from the equator you are. Here, tree line is around the elevation of 11,400 feet. Glacier National Park in northern Montana is further north of the equator, so tree line averages near 7,000 feet. Trees rarely grow in the Arctic Circle, where tree line is just about at sea level. We're approaching the Medicine Bow Curve, and so long as the weather's cooperating, we can see tree lines stretching across the mountains. We'll soon be above it and on the tundra. On a clear day, we can see the Medicine Mountains that extend all the way to Wyoming, 35 miles away. Here's the Alpine Visitor Center coming up on our left. Let's turn in. The Trail Ridge store next to the Visitor Center has souvenirs, food, and water. During the peak season, this is a very popular spot, so it could be crowded and parking could be pretty tight. If that's the case, well, let's just be patient. People are always arriving and leaving. This really is worth the stop. Just as we approach the parking lot, the hiking trail leading to the south is an old Ute Indian trail. that was also used for the original Old Fall River Road. The Native Americans would travel over this land in search of big game. Much of the road we're on follows their original trail. Once we turn in, north of the parking lot is a paved staircase heading up the tundra on the Alpine Ridge Trail. This gives hikers a chance to walk along the tundra without causing any damage. If we're able to catch our breath, we should go up for a look. The trail tops out at 12,000 feet, giving it the nickname Huffer Hill. This is a great stop. With all the amazing views this park offers, Gore Range Overlook is one of the best on this side of the park, as it gives us an impressive view of a few mountain ranges near and far. On a clear day, we can see for miles. We really should turn in. This is Colorado, showing off many peaks of this part of the state. To the right or west, we see the Never Summer mountain range. Just in front of the Never Summers and closer to us is Specimen Mountain. It's the mountain with two humps, almost looking like a V. Far past the Kawanichi Valley to the south, the Gore Range is visible. To give you a perspective, Vail Ski Resort is on the other side of that range, about 60 miles away. On our left, we can see the impressive backside of Long's Peak with the flat summit. The summit is about the size of a football field. The mountains to the west of Long's tower over Forest Canyon, an impressive canyon carved by a powerful glacier. I'll talk more about that soon. The sign at the pull-up will help you make sure you know which peak is which. As we leave the Gore Range Overlook, we'll come to a rise in the road. There's no sign or any fanfare to let us know that this is the highest point on all of the Trail Ridge Road. But we're about to reach 12,183 feet. The black rocks that can be seen on the hillside are from lava ash that also make up the lava cliffs just after the high point. These lava cliffs are formed from volcanic rock, and this is the only place in the park that will see this kind of volcanic rock. The contrast is striking and worthy of a picture or two. 28 million years ago, volcanoes were very active in the Never Summer mountain range. One large flow of incandescent ash extended this far and then cooled to form the rocks we see now. Much later, glacier ice movement carved into the hillside, exposing the rocks. There's a pullover called Lava Cliffs on the left if we'd like to see more. This view just doesn't stop, does it? These peaks and valleys have been shaped by glaciers for multiple ice ages. We should be able to see jagged rocks across the valley, and these mark the opposite side of Forest Canyon, which we've been following alongside since we left the Gore Range Overlook. We'll get a great view from an overlook soon. Glaciers are incredibly heavy And they move. They're powered by gravity. They grind and push rock like a bulldozer. They're powerful enough to rip the faces off mountains. It's amazing what the glaciers leave behind sometimes. There are steps in the rock and bowl-shaped valleys on the slopes as it drops into the canyon below us. The weight of the ice creates depressions, and these sometimes fill with beautiful mountain lakes. As we round the switchback, the view of the north is much different. The west sides of Chapin, Chiquita, and Ypsilon mountains are more smooth and rounded, but the eastern side is quite dramatically carved. I'll point these mountains out again so we can see the extreme difference. Being able to drive in the comfort of our cars through this amazing tundra landscape is a distinctively unique experience to Rocky Mountain National Park. Approximately 1/3 of this national park protects lands higher than the tree line. The tundra is made up of small plants and flowers that are really fragile, but incredibly hardy. These plants average only a 40-day growing season each year and have adapted to the harsh conditions. The flowering plants have dense hairs on their stems and leaves, which gives them protection from the wind and from losing water. Some have red-colored pigments, which turn the sun's rays into heat. Even under such a difficult environment, more than 100 species of plants live on the tundra in these high mountains. In winter, they are blanketed by the snow, which gives them insulation to withstand the extreme harsh winds and low temperatures. Winds can reach 150 miles per hour in the winter up here. The tundra is very fragile and is easily damaged by the weight of a human footprint. It's our responsibility to protect this area, so if you want to venture out, please only walk on the established trails. We're quickly coming up to another great and iconic view. We'll see parking spaces on both sides of the road. You'll want to slow down and let's try to find a spot. This is where we can take a walk on the Tundra Communities Trail, which is paved to keep us off the fragile tundra ecosystem. The trail goes to the Mushroom Rocks, which are rock pedestals that shaped from exposed, isolated rocks on the tundra. It's just over a mile round trip in length and will offer panoramic views of the surrounding mountains. If you do decide to take this amazing walk, make sure to carry some water and also bring a jacket along too. The wind can be chilly even during the hottest parts of summer. If we've made this drive in early June, we may be surrounded by walls of snow. Some walls get to be 30 feet in height through here. Just past the trail, we'll drive through the rock cut, and it's quite obvious why it has its name. There was nowhere else to put the road, so it had to go through the rocks. And the story suggests that the park superintendent thought that would be a bit more dramatic too. He was right. As we leave the rock cut, we're on our last stretch of tundra before heading back down below treeline. In these conditions, the plants have a tough enough time surviving, but some animals also live up here. The tundra is home of the ptarmigan. In case you don't know, this bird's name starts with a P. That's Ptarmigan, a member of the grouse family. They nest right at treeline and prefer to walk more than flying, as it's a way to conserve energy. Their feathers are all white in the winter, but are brown and gray in the summer. The yellow-bellied marmots love the rocks in the tundra where they build their burrows for their colonies. Each colony has a sentinel or guard who will chirp to sound the alarm of any approaching danger. They hibernate during the winter, cuddled together in their colonies beneath the snow. A marmot will spend over half of their lives in hibernation. A favorite animal to spot is the pika. Though it looks a little bit more like a rodent, the pika is actually a member of the rabbit family and will spend the entire summer gathering plants. Pikas do not hibernate, so they spend all summer and fall gathering food to survive on during the winter. Each pika needs to gather enough food to fill an entire bathtub. They live in colonies, but each will get very protective of their den and their stash of food. This high alpine tundra is also a haven for elk, who migrate here during the hot summer months. Herds can be seen grazing or sleeping all along this area. But when it gets cold, they leave the tundra and descend into the warmer valleys. We're about to arrive at the Forest Canyon Overlook. We should turn in, find a parking space, and take the short walk to the viewing area. It's quite easy to visualize what's created these peaks and valleys. In front of us, we'll see the pathway of the main glacier as it churned its way through, creating the Forest Canyon Valley. The ice was believed to have been 1,500 feet deep. Across the valley, almost perpendicular to the main glacier, a side tributary of the glacier has sat. As the ice pulled away from the rocks, and because of its immense weight, what it leaves behind is steep walls in the form of an amphitheater. We call this a cirque, and as I mentioned, there are beautiful lakes sitting in there. It's a remote part of the park because the deep valley acts like a barrier. There are just a few trails, but dedicated hikers can make the journey and enjoy the picturesque scenery and lakes. As we leave the Forest Canyon Overlook, just to the east on our right, you can see a burned area that almost reached the tundra. This area is rejuvenating itself after the Fern Lake fire in 2012, a wildfire that burned 3,500 acres and was the biggest fire in this park's history. From here, we say goodbye to the tundra and start to head back down into the trees. This is a good time to shift down to a lower gear to save our brakes. This park is sometimes called the rooftop of the Rockies because so much of it sits at high elevations. The Rocky Mountains refers to the major mountain range stretching from Canada through to New Mexico. Within the Rockies are many smaller ranges too, which also have ranges within them. Colorado has 7 primary mountain ranges, all with several secondary mountain ranges. Rocky Mountain National Park has 3 mountain ranges within its boundary. The Never Summers, the Mummy Range, which will come into view on our left, and the Front Range, which we've been looking at over Forest Canyon. The Front Range is more than 300 miles long and extends north into Wyoming. In Colorado, the Front Range includes Longs Peak, all the way south to Pikes Peak outside of Colorado Springs. Because the cities of Fort Collins, Denver, and Colorado Springs all look at this incredible mountain range, these cities, including all their suburbs, are referred to as the Front Range Urban Corridor, or simply the Front Range. So when someone says they live on the Front Range, they're most likely referring to living in one of those cities, and not really on top of one of the mountains. those thrill-seeking adventurous types, one of the draws to this park is rock climbing. There is a large variety of peaks and granite rock formations to challenge climbers here. On our left, just beyond Horseshoe Park, we should be able to see blocks of distinctive granite shapes among the trees. This area is known as Lumpy Ridge and is world-renowned for technical rock climbers. Throughout the park, the many peaks and their different shapes and sizes offer a buffet of options as well. Some climbers do technical routes up the same peak hikers can just walk to the top of. I guess it's all in how you want to reach the summit, right? If you've seen the face of Long's Peak from town, it has a sheer wall called the Diamond. Its name comes from its shape, and it's popular and challenging and for experienced climbers only. The sheer wall takes several days to complete. If a climber takes several days, you can't be climbing 24 hours a day. You need to rest and eat and sleep. Climbers sleep on a tent-like cot called a portaledge. It holds on to the rock ledge by anchors and ropes. Really good ones, I might add. Climbers hang their food and supplies from the cot. Even inside the portaledge, the climber is always tied in, which means he or she is attached to a rope anchored to the wall. Just over a mile ahead, we'll arrive at the Many Parks Curve Overlook. You won't miss it, and it's a view we definitely should stop for. The name is perfect, as the overlook shows off the many different parks within this national park. I understand that might sound confusing, doesn't it? Rocky Mountain National Park is one big park, isn't it? And it's not like we're looking into a bunch of other national parks, are we? The idea of the name goes back to the French fur trappers, who were in most cases the first non-Native Americans to see these places. Well, there was no such thing as national parks when they came here. In the trappers' French, the word parc had a meaning that translates to something like our word, enclosure. So an open meadow that's surrounded by forest or hills, to them was called a park. From this viewpoint coming up, we see many parks or open meadows. Maybe it should be called Many Meadows Curve. Probably not going to happen. We'll also see some fantastic peaks. The biggest mountain of them all is Long's Peak, majestically standing guard at an impressive 14,259 feet, the tallest in the national park. These parks are also the result of glacial activity, If we think of glaciers as bulldozers again, when they push piles of crushed rock, we call those moraines. Often the park has moraine hills on its boundaries. The idea of park also expands into bigger areas and places surrounded by mountains. As an example, Estes Park was named for the first settler to the area, Joel Estes. Since the town is in a valley surrounded by mountains, it was called Estes Park rather than Estes Town. Getting pretty close to the overlook. There's an upper lot and a lower lot. I suggest try for parking in the lower lot since we don't really want to cross the double yellow lines on this corner. It's easier to turn into the lower lot, which is on our side of the road. Watch for people on the pedestrian crosswalk. From there, we can take a walk on the boardwalk that follows the curve. The signage will help us identify the different peaks and features. We'll see the many parts of the park. When we reach the next hairpin, we'll be at the turnoff to Hidden Valley. It's now a summer picnic area, and in winter it's a popular snowplay area, with sledding down the slopes. But back in the 1930s, it was actually a ski area. The national park's first year-round ranger designed a ski run called Suicide Hill. Hidden Valley hosted the U.S. National Amateur Ski Championship back in 1934. And a local boy became the U.S. National Downhill Champion on Hidden Valley's own Suicide Hill. The ski area had rope tows on the upper and lower slopes that used car and marine engines with flywheels to run the tows. There was also a lunch shack, but the park determined that a commercial ski area was not aligned with the park's values, and in 1991, the ski area was closed. All the buildings and evidence of a ski area have been removed. But while you're in town, you might still see a poster or two promoting the little ski area. We don't have to turn in, but it is a nice rest place if you do.
destination is on the left.